grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm one of your hosts, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating, not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, I'm Jo Sparrow and I'm the president of Jigsaw Queensland and the host of Adopt Perspective. Our guest today is an adoptee from Newcastle, Australia, who says the internet, social media and DNA has been a game changer in her search for her biological family and connection. Louise Gleeson utilised all three during her search and is using them again now to help others. Welcome to Adopt Perspective, Louise. I'm so happy to have you join us.
Hi, Jo. I'm really happy to join you as well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I so enjoyed talking to you the other day as we sort of prepared for this, and really excited to share your story with everyone else.
Well, thank you.
Louise, could I start by asking you what it was like for you growing up as an adopted person?
It was good. I mean, I was really fortunate because my adoptive parents were very open about me being adopted, and my adoptive sister, who's a few years older than me, we just knew from the beginning. So I can't even pinpoint when I actually knew. It was like it was something I always knew. So obviously I must have been, very, very tiny little toddler. And it became a bit of a story, like, oh, tell me about when you got me, and that sort of thing. So it was done in a really loving way. And I felt really fortunate, particularly in retrospect, because you look back and say, wow, well, that was really nice that I was able to be open with my adoptive parents and kind of talk about it. It wasn't a secret, and that was really, really good. And I suppose I felt confident in being an adopted person growing up in the 60s and the 70s. And it wasn't really till I became a teenager that then I started delving into those more complex feelings that you go through when you're thinking of your identity. But again, my mum particularly, my adoptive mum, was always really supportive. So, that was great. Really good. But I think it was fortunate I looked a bit like my adoptive parents. So I didn't have that situation where I was a completely unusual child to my parents. Like we'd have people say to us, oh, gee, you're alike or something, But, it was what it was. You just you were adopted. And yeah.
Can I ask, was it something you were able to talk to your parents about it, or did you want to talk to them about it?
Yeah, I mean, it'd come up. It would, definitely come up.
Yeah.
Occasionally if we wanted to ask questions, they were open to talk about it. So that was always really good. I didn't feel, particularly with Mum, I felt like she was really open to ask questions. I remember there's a story that my sister was, 4 and having a tantrum, and she was sort of like, you're not my real mother, I'm going, packing a bag and leaving and going out like the front door and coming in through the back door, that sort of thing. I never did that, but it was just a funny story sort of thing. And I hope it wasn't upsetting for my parents, but I think my mum had her first marriage, she'd actually had a son, she had a child. And so I think she understood the complexities of a biological child.
Yeah.
For my adoptive father, his feelings, I think, were probably a little bit more complex. He was a returned serviceman from World War II. So he had a lot of, I think when I look back at it now, he probably had PTSD. And I think he probably was grieving his own infertility issues, and that wasn't something that you spoke about back then, but he was still incredibly loving. I mean, yeah, I think I was pretty lucky in the lottery, the crazy lottery, which back in my day, I was born in January 1964, was like, you go to the doctor, you're just your general practitioner, and you say, look, I'd like to get adopt another baby girl. And the doctor would say, or said to my mum, okay, we'll call you when there's a little girl available. And then the matron rang her from the unmarried mother's home and said, oh, hello, we've got a baby girl for you. It was kind of that simple, which is unbelievable when you think about it. And I know that later that year they put more things in place, social workers and Department of Community Services, etc. But just that idea that you could kind of go and ask for a baby, and
it's so simple and yet it's so complicated, isn't it? I'm thinking of those two lines, above the water, it's like, oh, I want another baby. Okay, here we've got another baby for you. Yeah. Under it is an enormous amount of loss and trauma that sits underneath it. But on the top is this celebration of getting a baby, in a simple way.
And I'm really aware that a lot of people, their adoption journey as an adoptee has been far more complex than mine, that they've had difficulties with their adoptive parents. And just like I said, that lottery, I mean, it's just absolutely bizarre, the fact that you think, wow, how fortunate am I to have landed where I did, or how unfortunate am I that I landed where I did, and I think
go on.
with a happy family like mine was, very nurturing and loving and warm, and I felt really good when I think about, particularly with my mum. It's just important to understand those complexities. Like, it's really complex being adopted, and it's okay anytime just to sort of say, look, I've got beautiful adoptive parents, or I had beautiful adoptive parents, however I still feel all these complex feelings. So I just I like to remind myself that it's that's okay.
Yeah. Actually, just talking to you has given me a little question without notice, so feel free to pass it if you don't want to answer. I grew up in a family where there was 3 biological children. I was the only adopted child. So I don't know what it would be like to have a sibling who was also adopted. I'm just curious if you discussed it with your sibling ever when you were growing up.
A little bit, but not a lot. Because my sister. So my sister was very not interested.
Yeah.
I didn't really want to talk about it. She was very much like, no, I've got my family and that's it. So she was not as curious as I was. So that's when I'd fall back on my mum to talk to her.
Yeah.
So I suppose Fran and I didn't talk about it that much. I remember one of my closest friends, when we were about 19, we both sort of confided in each other that we were adopted. For some reason, we weren't at school together, so we didn't know. And when we found that out about each other, that was just really incredible, because we were able to kind of talk about it with each other. And I suppose along the way, I've found different people to discuss with it. I mean, my sister and I, we're so close, but we're so different in a way. So, but she's, I love her to bits. And my mum's biological son, my adopted brother, he's quite a lot older than me, like 20 years older than me. So when we were growing up, he was a bit more like a kind of an uncle figure to me. But of course, when you get older and you're dealing with elderly parents that are getting sick and they're dying and what have you, you come all together. And so, it's quite lovely, really, when you think about the way that you all end up being brought together under these kind of crazy circumstances, that adoption lottery, like I said. Yeah.
So, Louise, what age were you in and what led to your search for your biological mother?
I remember being quite going through a really tough time. I was about 17 and I was pretty complex, like going through pretty kind of complex feelings. I would probably look back on it now and say I was probably having a bit of an episode of depression, but I didn't know that at the time. And I remember Mum saying to me, oh, maybe, you should look for your biological mum. It might be good for you. And I can remember going, Mum, like a 17-year-old would do. No, I don't think so, just totally wasn't ready at that point. But I think it's really nice when somebody plants a seed that it's okay. I used to, through the 80s, I would think, I'd look at somebody on the TV, like a newsreader or somebody that I kind of admired, and I think, I wonder if that's my mum, or she's some sort of businesswoman, or what she do, is she a teacher? Has she got a family? So you kind of always have that thing where you might see someone who you think, gosh, that person looks like me, and you'd sort of go, wow, I wonder if that's her. I think it's always there floating around for you. But it wasn't until I was 25, and that's when I decided, right, I think I'm going to search now. And I remember sitting down with Mum and Dad and said, look, I think I'm going to search now for my birth mother. And they went, okay, great. Well, that'll be really good for you. And they said, okay, well, we're going to tell you what we know. It isn't much. With my sister and myself, they both were able to cite the order of adoption at the solicitor's office when they're signing the papers. This was previous to the secrecy laws. So you wouldn't have been able to do that back, like literally months after I was born. I think it came in either 64 or 65 in New South Wales. So they kind of remembered that information for both of us, which was a real gift. And they said, right, we've got the surname and the location in Sydney. And I thought, wow, this is really, this is a good start. What do I do to begin? And I think that's when I reached out to this organisation called Adoption Triangle and went along to their meetings in Sydney to get some advice from other adoptees. And that was quite
people searchers today, like it'd be difficult for them to imagine what it was like for us back then. Like there was no internet, there was no social media. There, you had phone books, the electoral rolls, and if you didn't, before the records opened up, that was kind of it. And then registers that, maybe Adoption Triangle had, Jigsaw Queensland used to own it, have a contact register as well. That was all that we had to go on.
There was no contact register back then. I think it was 89. No. Nothing. They had, I remember Adoption Triangle had a pamphlet, and then they'd give you like a printout, like someone had typed up a letter, like a sort of a rote letter, that you write, where you're not disclosing any information in case the family don't know about your existence and that sort of thing. So just little things to help you, but they more or less would say, right, well, then in that case, if you've got a name, you go into the state library and you get all the electoral rolls out. And I can clearly remember getting these big electoral rolls out. And what I thought the most, sensible thing to do was to go back to the year that I was born or the year before that and look up the name in the area and then work my way forward. Yeah. And I worked on that assumption that, okay, let's assume that maybe they stayed in a similar area of Sydney. And luckily for me, a couple of them did. So I kind of was able to do a little bit of okay, well, there's those people living there at that address in this year, and there they are then. Oh, and then this one's moved nearby there, So I then wrote the letter. I'm wondering if you can help me. I was very close to her in 1964 in January, and I'd like to make contact again. And so I sent off all these letters to these people of the name in this area of Sydney and just sat, and waited. And I'd put my actual, because of course back then there was no mobile phones. It was I don't think we even had an answering machine back then. So I put my work phone number and also my home phone number. And I remember sitting at my desk at work and picking up the phone, and this fellow sort of said, "Oh, hello there. I've received your letter. And yes, I think I might be able to help you, but can I just get some information?" And basically he wanted to just confirm my date of birth. And he wanted to go away and ask somebody that knew exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, "I'll call you back tomorrow." And I went, "Okay." And then he said, he rang me back and he said, "Okay, look, I think it'd be good if we met." And then it was like, "Shall we meet at this cafe at this time on this?" I'll be wearing a cream jacket
with a flower in the lapel.
Yeah, I'll be wearing a blue shirt, and it was quite bizarre. So we stood outside this cafe and met, and we sat at the table, and God, I was nervous. It was, and I think about how young I was, unbelievable. And I just sat there and I must have just been this grinning idiot, looking at him. And he said, I'm your uncle. And I was just floored at, just that thing of looking at a birth relative for the very first time.
Yeah.
Your eyes are popping out of your head. You're scanning their face. You're looking at their chin, their nose, their eyes, everything. You're just sitting there going, wow, oh my God,
Talk about process overload too. How do you even process that in a moment?
No, you don't. It was just unbelievable. I was just, oh my God, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Remember the waitress put down our cappuccinos, and then we were sitting there and I'm grinning and I'm like, oh my goodness, oh that's so fantastic. Oh my God, I'm so happy to meet you. And I said, does my mother know that you're here meeting me? And then he had to tell me that she had passed away. And I can't remember his words because obviously it was just an absolute shock, because at this point she would have only been around 34 or 5, so she would have been incredibly young.
Yeah.
And it was incredible when you think back to your assumptions. I had never thought that was an option. I just thought, oh, she's a young woman. She's probably married with a family. She's just living her life, And so when he told me that, I was just I was just so shocked, And then I think he was trying to make up for it by telling me she was so beautiful, she was so this, she was so, and he was sort of telling me all these things about her, and I just literally I think I must have just been in absolute shock. And he eventually said, let's go for a walk. And I remember we walked nearby and there was a graveyard, and so we ended up sitting on a chair near this graveyard, and it was just sitting chatting. And that was actually kind of probably better because we were sitting beside each other, and I was just a stunned mullet completely. And so that was really devastating. I went back to work and I was just everyone was, how did it go? And then of course I was, really upset. And then I went home and I remember ringing my mum and telling her, and the two of us were just sobbing, crying. And she was just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she was just so gracious about it. And I just was crying and crying, just how do you grieve for this person you don't even know? And God, it was bizarre, And of course, then I settled into that and I had that honeymoon period with the family where I was wanting to see them and talk to them and, learn all about her. And I met my uncle and his family, and then I met an aunt and her family, and another couple of uncles, and lots of cousins, eventually my grandfather as well. But I could see when I met my grandfather, it was really hard for him because you could see all the grief. And at 25 you think everything's about you, and I'm thinking, Pop's really upset that I was adopted and he's feeling really upset about it. And then I think now that I'm older, I go, no, that man was absolutely devastated that he'd lost his daughter. And he was just grief stricken. I could just see it written over his face. But over the years, I've had to kind of draw the story out about her. And she had a pretty rough time. She was really traumatized. I've heard that she was really traumatized by having to give me up. She didn't want to, but she was forced to by her grandparents by my parents. She was forced to by her parents, my grandparents, because she was a teenager. She was, 17. And it was absolutely the right decision because, they just thought it'd be best for me to be adopted and grow up like in a family, and that she should just try and start her life again. And of course, it's not that simple. And they just said, right, you'll be okay. We'll, and then I think it probably wasn't talked about a lot, but I think she really went through a lot of upset and trauma that eventually led to her mental illness developing. And so she ended up having periods where she would be hospitalized, and it was really tough, and I understand how hard that is on a family to have a child and a sibling that's mentally ill. It's really challenging for everybody involved. And back then, the systems weren't as great as they are now. I think she was heavily medicated, and of course she didn't like being heavily medicated, and she'd feel better, go off the medication, and then she'd get unwell again. And then I think in the 70s, her mental illness was probably fairly pronounced. I don't exactly know, because it's quite difficult to navigate the family's feelings because it's upsetting for them as well. So I suppose what I've done over time is find out my own information about mental illness, and I feel, touched myself with, a bit of anxiety and periods of depression, whatever. But it was shocking a bit, I suppose, a little bit to find that out about my birth mother, because you sort of think, oh, is that going to be me, sort of thing. But on the other hand, though, some of the things about her that I found out really helped me understand myself. She was a bit wild, she was a bit reckless. She was, she was pretty vibrant. She lived life to the fullest, and some of her behaviors I went, I see myself there, so that in itself was great. So I've got no judgment whatsoever of her. I understand that she was a complex person, as we all are. So it's been a journey, a long journey, and it's still going. Mm-hmm. But I've got a lot of love for her, and I've always, thankfully, due to my adoptive mother's big heart, I've got always that thing was we need to think about your mum. We need to say a prayer for her and think about her and acknowledge that she's probably thinking about you, and I'm sure it was hard for her. And, so there was always a lot of love, and that was a really nice thing. Like, I didn't feel angry or upset or anything like that for her. I just felt, to be honest, as the stories unfolded, I just felt completely heartbroken. Heartbroken for her. And all I wanted to do when I found out about her and her life, and I just wanted to give her a big hug and tell her everything was okay and that I was okay. And that was the hardest part, not being able to help, I suppose, because you just think, what could I have done for you? Would it have made any difference? Probably not, but it might have. Just that tiny bit might have helped. Sorry.
Don't be sorry.
So it's you just wish you could be there for that person, a lot of love there for her. And
There's I think there's two things that you talked about that I just want to draw out a little bit. I mean, the first thing that you said is, because we had, I think it was David Brzezinski, people will let me know if I've got this quote wrong, but he said adopted people are always searchers, because a lot of people say, I haven't searched, not interested in finding, but from the earliest of ages, well, if we know, we're looking in crowds where, you know, I remember being on chairlifts at the Toowoomba show, looking down, and could my mother be down there, or getting on a train, could my mother be on this train, you know,
Yes, yeah.
looking at people on TV and, wow, do they look a bit like me?
Yeah.
So we are always searching, even if we're not actively searching.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, when we go into reunions, sometimes we're so, and it's a natural instinct to be so focused on our own experiences we're going in, because it's such a Pandora's box. It's such, you're just looking into a lot of, you know, an abyss, really, not knowing what's coming back, whether you'll be accepted or rejected, all those things. But I love that you're able to see from the other side, from the people that you're meeting, that there's a whole pile of grief and layers to what they're feeling when they're meeting you as well. And you know, sometimes we take things that we're seeing or reading in a certain way, and it's really not to do with us, it's to do with, there's this whole other world that sits behind their feelings.
Oh God, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that, because we can sort of just focus on our own experience and interpret things as rejection, or, you know, not getting what we want, and sometimes it's got very little to do with us and a lot to do with their memories. And
also like fear as well, you know, I mean, because when you're searching, when you actually do embark, it's a scary business. It's so scary, because you don't know what you're going to be faced with, you know, and people that find rejection is often because of the fear. Like we're sort of a family, like a mother's given up a child for adoption and nobody knows about it. You know, I know people who's been in that situation where they've kept it a secret. They've kept it a secret from their husband and their children. And of course, they're absolutely terrified. They're terrified of being rejected and judged, and, you know, all those feelings. So it's really complicated for everybody involved, which I think it's important that people take that all into account. I know with my maternal birth family, they're so beautiful, you know, they were so great. They were just, we hoped you'd find us. We're so happy you found us, you know. And they were very welcoming. Getting to know the family and being part of the family has been complicated in itself, just over 30 odd years, that you feel part of it, but you don't feel part of it.
Yeah.
You know, things that you don't know about the cousins, of all these things that they might have done when they were together as kids. And you're sort of hearing them together talking about something, and you realize you're on the outside of that. And you go, oh, I'm part of this, but I'm not part of this. So, you know, yeah, so it's sort of, it's a bit strange. You know, just things like family things that you might not, that you're just, for sort of family heritage things that are kind of like, oh, guys, remember when we used to do this at grandma, you know, at house, and we'd run around and do such and such, and you're thinking, well, wasn't there then, don't know what you're talking. Or they try to tell you something and you sort of think, oh, that's great, but I wasn't there, sort of feeling. So it's that in between that adoptees have, where you know you belong to all these families, but you're kind of still there. Yeah. And I felt very much when I did find them, it was okay, like it was a good thing. It wasn't a bad thing, but I felt very much like, oh, okay, well, I'm just me in the world. I'm a person in the world, and I've got my, you know, I found my maternal family identity and information. I've got my adoptive family, but ultimately I'm just alone in the world. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that in a sad, oh, I'm alone way. I'm just like, okay, I'm just a person existing in the world.
It's like a mohair blanket some ways, isn't it? Like, yes, it keeps you warm, but it itches, it's scratchy. So, and sometimes that's what interacting and reunions can feel like. They feel good and they feel bad at the same time sometimes. Yeah.
I had this funny occasion where a cousin came, my maternal family, a cousin came by to stay, and I was making a salad. This was, I don't know, not that many years ago. And he said, I said, I'll make some dressing. He goes, oh, you're going to do our grandma's famous salad dressing. And I said, what's our grandma's famous salad dressing? And it was like a real kick in the guts. Like, I didn't know what the grandma's famous salad dressing was.
Yeah.
Basically, it was just a vinaigrette. But you know what I mean? But it was like, oh, you don't know grandma's famous salad dressing? Well, no, how would I know that? I never met grandma. She died before. Those like really tiny details that kind of just occasionally, it's almost like someone slapping you going, let's remind you that you're adopted.
It's funny. I remember when the day I met my father's extended family, I don't know, you go into it so much wanting to connect and wanting them to like you. And I was asking him what were some recipes that, your mother used to make. And I was hoping to make them, and he'd give me these vague sort of things that he remembered. And I'd been in contact with his sister by then. And either he or I had said to her, oh, do you know Mum's recipe for this pineapple tart or whatever? And she twigged, men don't get it, but sorry, men, but often men don't get these things, but she twigged straight away what I was trying to do, like trying to connect and find a way to mirror things. And so not only did I get the recipes, but she actually made a whole pile of things that her mum used to make and brought them just for me, which was really nice. So and I remember I came home and she'd given us this sponge cake that her mum used to make. And I came home and I sat and I just cried at a table eating it. It was just, it almost stuck in my throat. It was just, it was so sweet.
I love it. Crying over your cake.
First time I cried over a cake. I've eaten a few cakes because I was crying, but
I love that. And I completely understand because, now I'm actually thinking I should be ringing my aunt and going, have you got any of her, grandma's recipes?
It's just one of the ways we try to fill in those pages, those chapters.
I know. And I think the hardest bit is understanding that you're never going to fill them in properly, particularly when you've got a parent. Well, actually, I've got both experience. So I've had one parent who was passed away, but then I've got a living birth father. So even then, I'm not going to know his whole life. But with her, I've just had to kind of work out what I can. And I've spent a lot of time trying to track down friends of hers and other people outside the family that might have stories. And even if it's sort of sisters-in-law or people that are maybe just that little bit removed. So you're not getting the sibling story, which relates to, she was really mean. She sort of ruined my best dress or something, or I mean, not that anyone said that, but just sibling stuff, you know what I mean? Whereas you get sort of that objective from that little bit, further afield. And I've been really lucky in that I've had a few really nice friends from the 60s tell me some nice stories. And, she was just a normal teenage girl having a great time in the 60s. It happened, unfortunately, to have gotten pregnant and had to give up a child for adoption. And
I love that. I mean, we've done a couple of episodes on Adopt Perspective, I think last year, about what we call graveside reunions, which is when, and it could be whether there's, both parent has passed or not, but the ways that we can try and connect and fill in some stories and ground ourselves within a family when there maybe isn't that connection through whether, they are unable to meet us or they've passed or whatever, or maybe it's just going back through the ancestry of the family and grounding ourselves deeper into it for lots of reasons. And I love that you're doing that because you can sort of at least color in some of those pages. And each time you do that, it's one more little connection that's made.
And colouring in is a great way to put it because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the light and shade and the colour and the darkness of their lives. You want to get that sort of whole aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was pretty amazing, and I'm thankful. I'm sorry, but for her, like for her not being able to have been here to sort of for us to have had that big hug.
Yeah.
But I reckon she's probably, I don't know, she's with me. Obviously, she has to be because I'm existing from her. So it's that's okay.
So you mentioned before your father.
Yes.
How, I guess, what did your mother's family tell you about him, and how long did you wait before that became a search for you? And just, can you tell us everything?
Okay. So obviously that was the very first thing that
Yes.
well, not very first thing, but one of the very first things that I said, does anyone know who my father is?
Yeah.
And basically the answer was, we have no idea. When she confessed to her parents that she was pregnant, she was about maybe 3 or 4 months pregnant, I think. And of course, her parents, my grandparents' first thing was, who's the father? And I think she thought they were going to march her down to him and make her get married or something, you know. And she was like, that doesn't matter. It's my baby, you know. And she wouldn't say. And so I didn't know if it was a case of her not knowing whether she was, you know, sleeping with more than one guy, or whether she just sincerely did not want to say anything. She wanted to keep it a big secret. Never told a soul, never told anyone at all. Nobody knew. The only indication I got was from this family friend who, like, cared for her during her pregnancy, her confinement, as they call it. She came up here to Newcastle for her confinement. So it was the typical, we've got to send you away because you're pregnant and you're not married and you're a teenager. And so where can we send you? I know there's family friends in Newcastle, and you go up there and she can keep an eye on you in the unmarried mother's home. So this beautiful person who I met a lot, and she was gorgeous, she would come over and visit with my birth mother during her pregnancy and take her out for days, you know, out. They'd go for drives and, you know, go out for walks or whatever. And she said once to this lady, I think the baby's going to have dark hair. That was it. That was it. So
it's a big lead.
So that was it. And so all I knew was that she was big into the surfy scene. And so it was probably a surfy, and he might have had dark hair. And then it was, maybe, you know, it was this person, maybe it was that person. But there was absolutely no way of knowing. When Facebook came along, I remember getting on there, and I joined this group, and it was like surfing from the 60s and 70s in this, you know, region. And it was like, I thought I'll just get on there and have a little sneaky look at what all these old surfies are talking about, you know. And I'd actually grown up in the surfy scene, but in the 70s. So I pretty much understood what it was like. And so it was really funny, like looking at these guys, you know, writing about, the good old days back in the 60s and all this sort of thing, and posting photos and stuff like that. That's actually where I did find a few of her girlfriends, and they were really nice to chat to me and give me information about her as a girl, you know. Quite funny, actually, because if you ever wrote a message, some of the guys, you could sort of feel them running backwards.
Yes.
Sort of like, oh my God, it's a kid, you know. They all have that fear that maybe there's someone out there. But yeah, it was really interesting. Yeah, that was so funny. Anyway, that's all I could do at that time because nobody had a clue. So ultimately I would, that's what I would just lurk and search, but with no information. However, in 2016, I did the ancestry DNA test. I was like,
changer.
this is a thing. This is an interesting thing. I thought this is going to be something that could potentially be a big help to me. So I took the test, just spat in the tube, sent it off, and bam, came back my results. And I was like, oh, okay, who are all these people? And I had people coming out of the woodwork sort of saying, oh, hello, who are you? How are we related? And all this sort of thing. And then I just kind of had to say to them, well, I don't know. I'm adopted. My maternal aunt, she's so lovely. She was very kind and said, I'll do the test as well. And then you can get your maternal matches over to one side and you can get your other matches over to the other side and you'll work out, who's who. So anyway, so I looked at this list and literally it was like hieroglyphics. It was like looking at, Martian language, because you just have no idea what the hell any of it means.
That's how I feel about it. It's like accounting.
Yeah. I know. And I'm not a maths person.
No, me either.
So for me, it was just like, what the hell? So I opened up this DNA match list and it was like looking at another language, and I had no concept of what was going on. I thought, oh, there's all these people and I don't know who they are. And anyway, these 3 ladies got in touch with me and they were unbelievably helpful and amazing. And they embraced my story, embraced me, and said, we're going to help you, because they were related to my paternal family and they were, really gracious and really helpful. And they'd done a lot of research. They'd done a lot of research into history of, distant ancestors and things like that. Mm-hmm. But they were pretty determined to help me. And one in particular who I just, I think she's so wonderful, and she's just become someone very dear to me, who turned out to obviously be, a relative, but it was just so lovely. She, she did what she could to help me, and including an Excel spreadsheet with, going back the generations. And then these people had these children and they, and so we were looking at people born in the 40s and, it was so lovely. I had my own family and life going on, work and life and children. And so, of course, it would be a part-time thing where I would look over 2 years, and you'd go down a road and then it'd be a dead end and you'd try something else, Eventually, I went down the list of kind of potentials and I would research, and it's laborious and it's frustrating and it's exciting too, because you find out fascinating things. And I look back at it now and I think how fabulous, but at the time it was kind of like, oh, I'm never going to get there. But I remember one day sort of going, oh, hang on a minute, this looks really promising. And I sent this particular this DNA match, who'd become quite close to my search. I said, oh, I think I might be onto something here. And I sent her a message saying that, and I gave her the names, and she rang me immediately, and she said, "That's my mum's cousin or something, or this is it. I think this might be it." So she was really, really excited, and we sat on it, or I sat on it, and sort of thought, okay, I'll just sort of settle into this knowledge.
Yeah.
But I'll also do some backup research. So I went on to Google, and I Googled this person, and it came up with a blog, and gotta love those old surfer dudes. He has a blog about the good old days of being a surfie, and he'd written a blog post about this particular person, and he more or less just outlined that he'd kind of got involved with the surfy scene in this area and what have you. And I was like, wow, this really sounds right time, right place, right group of people, And then I thought, I'll go back to that Facebook group with the old, surfy dudes and just have a look at their photos and stuff. And I put in a search for this person's name, and it pops up with this group photo. And the group photo, he's standing in the back in the middle, and it literally looked, I thought, oh my God, that's my son, my teenage son. There was this real family resemblance, and I was just like, I think this has got to be him, So I just made sure that I had everything right. I had these things. I crossed it back and forth with, this particular person. She kind of happened to see a cousin of his somewhere and asked a few kind of like questions. Oh, so, and crazily enough, he was in the white pages and lived in the same area still all those years later. And so I sat on it for about 6 weeks or 8 weeks or something. I was so scared, I didn't know what to do. But then I eventually went, I'll write a letter. And I didn't know what to say, really. I thought, well, there is no way to say this sort of, I just said, look, I said, oh, I believe you might have known my mum. I just sort of said, there's no easy way to say this. I think I might be your biological child. I understand you've got a life and a family. There's nothing I want. I just wanted to reach out to you, and we can do a DNA test. I could send you a DNA test to confirm. And I told him a little bit about myself. But I attached a collage of colour photocopy of a collage of photos of me across the ages, like a baby, and then also my birth mother as well, back in the 60s, to jog his memory. And I sent it off, and I just went, okay, I'm putting it out there. This is either going to be answered or it's going to be ignored, or I don't know what. So I just sent it and waited. And I didn't have to wait long. He emailed me back, a couple of, it wasn't even 2 weeks later, it was a week and a half. They'd been away for holiday, actually. And he said, oh, I got back from a break and I got this letter. And he said, I was really surprised, and I just don't understand how you tracked me down. It's sort of, I still don't think he understands to this day. But he said, I'm arranging the DNA test, and I'd be happy to chat. When I eventually met months down the road, after having we used to speak on the phone every week, and we still do. And that was a really good way to get to know each other. And he'd tell me stories about his family and stuff like that. But the DNA test came back 100%. Your father, parent, child, Gary. Here's your father. Yeah. And of course I cried, and I rang him. He was thrilled. Well, he was thrilled. He was okay. He was being really lovely about it all, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was funny because when I finally met, his wife said to me, he got the letter from me, and she said, what is it? Because he sort of looked shocked. And she picked it up and she flicked to the photos, and she said, you don't need to do a DNA test. This one's yours. Because when you look at a photo of me and him when we're little babies and toddlers, we just look, really similar.
Yeah.
And that to me was a huge kick, because when I found my maternal family and I saw photos of my birth mum, I thought it was going to be like looking in a mirror, and it wasn't. Like, I got similarities to her, but she was fair, and I'm really dark hair, and it was really interesting to find out, I look like my dad. Oh, great. So that's been an absolute thrill. It's still a thrill. Yeah. It really is. And his family have been so gorgeous about it and so lovely. And they're so nice. And it's so great to have this relationship. And he's hilarious and he makes me laugh and we chat and, he's like me. He talks a lot, throws his arms around when he talks, a cheeky sense of humor. I mean, it's just been absolutely incredible. Yeah. I mean, there was sort of, I think, I think he was a bit nervous to meet at first, but once we did, and then once he met the kids, everything was fine. I think realized that, it was very fortunate, but yeah, so that was that. And that was DNA for you. And I mean, I now am completely hooked on the genealogy research. And I've done so much research into his family history, stuff that he had no interest in or knowledge in.
Yeah.
And I just love it. I just love going, oh, wow, we've got this convict or this sad story from the World War I and, all these things, it's just a real gift. And I love it. I love that feeling of 100% knowing.
Yeah.
It's
Louise, if I can make a suggestion is like I had those kinds of connections too, but like we were saying before, they kind of seem black and white to me. If you ever, and you may have already done this, but if you ever have the opportunity to visit grave sites or find other ways to connect, it can really, it's very powerful.
Yeah.
If that's something that you choose to do down the track and able to, but
yeah, I've done, well, obviously I went to my mum's grave back years ago, and that was pretty moving. And even last year I went to the UK and did some graves. And it was funny because I got to this one and I just burst into tears.
Yeah.
I was at this grave site and, and I was thinking, oh, this is so moving. Yeah, it was quite incredible.
It's a funny thing. I felt like when I was at the grave site, it's going to sound a bit airy-fairy, but I actually felt like the 3 women that I was there to visit, or 4 really, I actually felt like they all lined up behind me. I almost felt like I had them lined up with like a hand on my shoulder.
Oh, no, I get that.
I've felt them with me ever since. I felt completely connected, and it has changed, like some things I wanted to change in my life. Since then, I felt like I've been able to change. And it was almost like they're behind me, like with a hand on the back saying, go on, do it.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest thing.
I get that. I really understand that feeling. I feel that too. Particularly with my mum, my birth mother. Just feel that feeling of her being there. Definitely. Yeah. Oh, that's lovely.
So this isn't the end for you. I mean, you've had connections coming at you forever. Can you tell us about the third connection that you have made?
Yeah. So I found out, eventually found out through my maternal family that my birth mother had another child. And back then when I was, young, in my 20s, and just coping with everything I'd learned about her and the fact that she was passed away, to learn that there was a little boy out there who would have been a teenager, I suppose, in that time, was just, I was completely confused. And I look at it now and I understand the absolute heartbreak for her in that she got pregnant again, was really excited about having a baby, and then he was taken off her again.
Yeah.
My grandparents wanted her to have him adopted and she refused, and she wanted to get better because she was going through an episode of mental illness, and she was prepared to get him back when she was better. And then just unfortunately that didn't happen. I said, well, where is he? You know, and it was really quite upsetting and frustrating to me that nobody knew. And I think from their point of view, I try to look at it from every side. And I think from my grandparents' point of view and my family, like my maternal birth family's point of view, they probably felt like with me, oh, it's for the best that this child is just left to be adopted and live its life. And, you know, hopefully they'll find us.
Yeah. A lot of people felt they had no right to intrude.
Yeah, I suppose it was just a case of that. Oh, let's let them live their life and hopefully they'll find us and we're here if they want to find us, sort of scenario.
Yeah.
I had no way of finding him. I didn't know how to find him. And when I found out, I remember thinking, I can't cope. What am I going to do with this? You know, I was so young. I actually went to London to live for a while. I think I was still processing it all through my 20s of having found my maternal birth family and just, you know, her having passed away and her life. Like it was a lot to come to terms with. And I was just really totally confused. And then I just thought, well, how do I find this boy, you know? And I had no idea. I couldn't even find him. It was really, it was really, really, really strange because you sort of think, well, he was fostered. So he was fostered, and then when she passed, his foster parents adopted him. And I know now that he had a lovely adopted family, and that's great, you know. But again, I also know now that it's not always been smooth sailing for him, like with any adoptee, and that you feel in between, and you feel those complex issues. And he's had dark days, and so have I, and I suppose I'm full of Catholic guilt. I just wish I could have been there for him again, you know. I just feel like, could I have been there for him? But no, it's okay. It's okay because we've now come together. We've met each other at the right time in our life. So I'm sorry because my story is going all over the shop now because...
Well, that's adoption. It is all over the shop.
It is.
Yeah.
My DNA list sits there and I check it every second day or so. And I know some people, when people pop up, you pop up on your DNA list, it goes up. And so I know that I sat there thinking, one day something's going to happen and he's going to pop up. This is going to happen one day. So I was checking my list, always checking my list, knowing that one day he was going to pop up. And about a year ago, this name popped up and it was high, really high match. And I thought, wow, okay, is this something to do with my brother? So, of course, I wrote to this person and I didn't hear anything. And then about, 8 months later or so, 9 months later, I wrote again. And I said, oh, hello, just writing again. I can see, I haven't heard back from you and just wondering how we're connected. And then I sent that message and then I said, oh, I just thought I'd better tell you a bit about myself. I'm adopted and, this was my birth mother. And I know that I think, I know she had a son and his name was, at birth. And I just thought maybe you're connected to him. So finally, just after Christmas, I get a message back and this person says, I've talked to my dad. I've read your message and I've talked to my dad about it. And actually he's confirmed that, yes, he is this person, and that was his birth name. And my dad's really shocked because he didn't know that he had a sister. And he's just processing this, but can you give me your details, your contact details, and he'll get in touch when he's ready. And I said, oh my God, I was just absolutely thrilled to bits and shocked and excited. And I said, yes, of course. I said, I get it. I totally get it. Tell him to take as much time as he needs to process this. It's a lot. That's fine. And I expected him to, want to take as long as it needed to be for him to contact me, because I thought this guy's stunned. He didn't know he had a sister. And he rang me pretty much sort of straight away, and we had a lovely chat on the phone. And he was obviously shell-shocked. And then he was kind of like, well, let's meet, in a month or so. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. You take as much time as you need. It's a lot, And that was brought forward a bit, but he ended up coming up with the boy that had taken the DNA test, his son, his beautiful son. They came and we couldn't eat, too nervous. But we sat there and laughed and cried and had a lovely first meeting. And it's only been, I think we've met now. We've talked and met a few times, but it's literally only been a couple of months. So it's
all new. It's all happening.
Yeah. So we're very, very excited and happy. And it was just so funny. Like last week he had a meeting up here and he came and we met and had coffee. And then we were just like walking along like a couple of grinning idiots. Such happiness and just, and I mean, he's got to process his own feelings and journey and stuff too. But it's been, I feel like I've just, that adoption lottery, I've won it. I've won the adoption lottery now. And he's lovely. He's really warm and he's lovely. He's so lovely. And I immediately said to his son, share your DNA match list with me, and I'm going to do my color-coded Excel spreadsheet and try and work out some things for you. So I've been working on his paternity for him, but one thing at a time. It's enough that you've got a sister that you didn't know you had a sister, and she but we're just going really nicely. And I had a joke with my birth father, and when I told him, I said, I've got this brother. And he was like, wow, and I said, okay, that's it. Unless you've got some more surprise kids out there, I think I'm done. So we had a bit of a laugh about that, but I'm hoping that that's it. I think I feel like I'm my soul's exhausted by the whole thing, but in a good way. I mean, I'm just, it's amazing. So I think if anyone out there is sort of toying with the idea of doing their DNA test, my advice would be do it, because it's exciting and fun. And I mean, I've got to tell you that doing the whole ancestry, the genealogy, the family history stuff is really rewarding in itself, finding out about all your ancestors and stuff like that. But I've been really happy with that. And I know it has been complex for a lot of people, DNA, because there has been situations where there's been people that have found out that they're not actually related to who they thought their father was, or their siblings, only a half sibling or whatever. So again, like with any situation, you have to be prepared for whatever comes at you, good and bad. We're a very resilient bunch, us adopted people, aren't we?
We are. I mean, we've had to adapt from the get-go. So we don't have a lot of choice but to be resilient if we can be.
Yeah. And I feel that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with being resilient. I think it's a really good thing.
Well, and you highlighted something before that really resonated with me. I had a conversation with my father recently about just saying I present very well. Like, people would look at me or talk to me and think that, I've got things together adoption related, and to a degree I put a lot of work in to get that. But I said to him, I can tell you now, I've experienced some very dark days in my life because of adoption. And I didn't say that to whack him or anything, or just to say, you can always find how I'm presenting as to what might sit underneath that sometimes erupts. And I think you present very well too, but obviously there's an awful lot that's been going on and that you've had to be resilient and process through your journey as well.
Absolutely. And I think that it's important, particularly for those people that are out there and they're adopted and they say, oh, I'm fine, everything's great, I've got this lovely adoptive family and I'm really happy. That's great. That's really great. But it's okay to be, like the duck, calm on the surface, but the little legs going underneath. That it's okay to have all those complex feelings, because that's only natural, because it is a really complex business. And
And it's smart not to want to share it with everybody, because not everybody's a safe place to share it. So, sometimes you don't want to go digging around in the muck either. Sometimes you just want to stay in that safe place.
Absolutely.
Which is when you're not thinking about it.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's understandable to be, feeling like I just want to keep everything on an even keel, because I know, for example, with the discovery of my brother and the being reunited with my brother, it's so wonderful and joyous. But for the both of us, we felt like we'd been kind of hit by a truck again. All the feelings come back up again, and you just go, whoa, and it's very emotional. It's a roller coaster. And
for you've been through it a few times now, so you recognize that. For him, he may be at the beginning of what is this, but with a bit of experience under your belt now, it's going to go up, going to come down, and then it might even out, hopefully.
Yes, absolutely. So I think all you can do is hang on really tight to that roller coaster and just go with it.
Yeah.
And, and just, it's okay to have the ups and the downs.
And there is support services available now too, that, you don't have to do it alone, whether it's peer support or professional support. There are some places that can help you with people who are very experienced to do so. And sometimes just having someone to ring up and say, I'm having a bad day, and talk it out with, it can be enough sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love that about the community, the adoption community, like hearing, say, your podcasts where you're hearing people's stories and you're like listening, going, yeah, gosh, I can really relate to that. I think it's important for us to feel as adopted people that there are others out there. You're not on your own. We get it. And I know that was a really big thing for my brother and I, to just be able to go, we get it. I get it. I get how you're feeling. I get how you're feeling 100%. And he knows, that's really nice to know that. And I hope that's a comfort for him.
Yeah.
But
Louise, look, I thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the very best with your ongoing connections with your father and your maternal family and your brother. And I wish you all the very best. And I do hope you keep in contact and, let us know how things go. But I just wanted to thank you so much for being on the podcast. I don't know how long we've gone for. We might have gone a bit too long, and there's no way I'm editing anything out. So we might have 2 episodes instead of 1, but we'll see how long we've gone. But thank you so much for sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Jo. You make it very easy, because it's so lovely speaking with you, and I really appreciate you listening to me rabbit on. And it's lovely to share, and I hope that it can be helpful to some others. And thank you so much, and thanks for the podcast. It's really lovely.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo.
And look, thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today. And if you have the story that you'd like to share with us, just like Louise, you can jump onto the main podcast page of Jigsaw Queensland website, complete the prospective guest form that you'll find there. And just remember that Adopt Perspective can be and is listened to by people all over the world. But bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you're calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.